been going on in the year, what we're looking forward to, and how we're going to wrap up as we move into the final quarter of the year. Well, in October, we also recognize and acknowledge Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So today we have a very special guest with us. She comes to D. Miller and Associates with years of fighting for survivors of crime. And while this is a special platform to show brave and showcase the many stories, I can't think of a better guest to have as an expert with us today. Please join me in welcoming Gabrielle Becker. Hi, Gabrielle.
Hi, Kim. Thank you for having me.
I
I'm
am
very
so
excited to be
glad.
here.
Yes, well, thank you for joining our firm as an esteemed attorney, and I know you come with a ton of experience. So we are really anxious to learn about you, your where your passion came from, and a little bit about your family. So tell me about where you grew up.
Yeah, so I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and I actually went to college at Texas State University. So I stayed in a similar area. And then I went to law school. I went to Houston. I went to South Texas College of Law in Houston.
I see. So I imagine that was quite an accomplishment, to make it through and achieve that goal. And I'm wondering, was there someone in your life that kind of inspired that type of a lofty goal, or something that, made you feel justice minded and interested in the law?
Yeah, so you're actually going to laugh, Kim, but Olivia Benson from Law and Order SVU. Have you ever seen that show before?
I have seen that show many times, and I love that.
Yes. I wanted to be Olivia Benson. I wanted to be her in the way that she helped people. And that was young Gabby, right? That's what I envisioned. As I got older, it was actually my dad and my mom who persuaded me to push to not only be Olivia Benson, but to be the Casey Novaks and the Alex Cabot's of the world, which were the ADAs, and to pursue a career in law.
Wow. I love hearing about that, because from what I understand, you went on to work within and lead an SVU of your own in Montgomery County, Texas. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. I actually waited on the Special Victims Unit in Montgomery County, Texas as a prosecutor.
Well, thank you for that work, and congratulations. I want to step back for a second, because for many years, the idea of serving victims well and having special, processes and services to be compassionate for them was rare, right? And so when the show SVU launched, and one of the inspirations for you, what was it about that you knew would make a difference in the world?
I think honestly, when thinking about what would make a difference in the world, I had to ask myself, I know I want to help people, but what does that truly mean? Right? And I had to think about it. And as I grew, as I grew in my career, I recognized that meant that everything I did, everything I put my hands on mattered. Even if it was a simple email, even if it was a phone call, if it was an interaction with the survivor in person, if it was speaking to a defense attorney, if it was speaking to a judge, if it was speaking to jurors, even if it was something as how I walked into the courtroom, every little thing that I did every day, every detail mattered. And so that's really one of those things when I think about how important it is to help people. It's not just this blanket state of I'm here to help people, right? It's really down to the details on how you do your job and making sure that you help survivors find their voice.
Wow, that just really reminds me of a warrior mindset. I got chills all over, because I was thinking about a quote that I heard from a survivor named JC Dugard once. And I don't know if you remember her. She was kidnapped while walking to the school bus when she was like 12. This is years ago in the 90s maybe, and held hostage and held captive for, years and years, a decade, had, children by the offender, and she was able to be rescued and escaped. And one of the things about her story that was compelling is that there were a lot of interactions with the system where she kind of was there. And so when asked, why don't you feel, angry at the system for not finding you earlier? Or she said, if everyone just does the next right thing and does the thing they're doing the very best they can, then there's hope. And so, I
Yeah.
haven't thought of that quote for years, but what you just said really is the true testament of what survivors need is people in the system doing their best job every step of the way.
Every step, every detail matters. There's no small detail in it, right? So yeah, I agree with that.
Well, so deciding to go into law and having been inspired to work with survivors of crime, did you know right away that you wanted like the crimes against persons, sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse, and things like that? Was your heart there?
I knew I wanted to help people. I just didn't know how that was going to look. And if I can be completely honest, it was a little bit intimidating, right? Because here comes little old Gabby trying to herself figure herself out, 25, 26 years old, and having to talk to people about one of the worst experiences of their life. And in my mindset, I'm like, these people, they don't want to speak to someone as young as me or as not mature or maybe not experienced, right? And so it was a little bit intimidating. And I was always felt like I was walking on eggshells because I never wanted to offend anyone. I never wanted to come off in any way that was not what they wanted, right? And so I think ultimately, though, as I pursued my career and I showed up, essentially, I still did it. I fought through that uncomfortness. I fought through the intimidation and I showed up and I realized, wow, I'm actually have a really good passion for this. And I actually do a very good job. And of course, I had to be trained, right? I did mess up a lot of times. But I did have to be trained. I had to be trauma informed. I had to be educated on these things. And so as I just began my experience with my work over and over, it grew on me. It was one of those things where I said, you know what? There are only certain people in the world that I feel like can handle this stuff. Not everyone can. And I prayed about it and I felt like God had put me there. So I was going to step up to the challenge. So I did it.
Love that. I have tears, honestly, because as a survivor, that's really the best thing is that the people that we're interacting with within a system that is often so foreign. And it sounds like you were kind of finding it that way too, as you're stepping into this important work, just all of the words and the terms and the processes and all that. But when someone is there like you, who, even though you feel like I'm growing and learning, I'm still there, I'm showing up. That in itself is such a wonderful benefit and full of so much compassion. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So hearing those stories, though, now this is where I want to pivot a bit because I know you were working in the prosecutor's office and you were also building your life on the outside, right? Finding your mate, finding your perfect partner, building your family, adding to it with a precious dog, Riley. And how long have you had that sweet nugget?
Riley Ray, I have had her. She turned 2 in May of 2022, so recently. But she's a mini golden doodle. She's about 20 pounds. She's my baby. She's very spoiled.
But, it looks like, and it sounds like you have had her involved even in your work and your tough cases, had her volunteering. Tell us about that.
I have actually. So she, when I was at the DA's office in Montgomery County, she would wear specific bandanas to support a cause. She did Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and she would do the mad walks, and she would put pictures on her little Instagram. She did human trafficking, so we did a little bandana in regards to stopping human trafficking. And then I just honestly, I would bring her around the office as much as I could as well for just my coworkers, right? I do feel like animals, whether it's a dog, whether it's a horse, whether it's goat, a cat, even fish. I know that there's been studies about, even fish helping, but I know that I would bring her specifically to help my coworkers and just giving them that sense of comfort of, it's a little bit of sense of breather. And so, yeah, I did try to get her involved as much as I could.
I love that as well because, like you said, it's such a comfort experience to be around a pet, even if you're just watching them play and run. And then also for you on the personal side of resiliency, which we'll definitely talk more about, but giving yourself some tools and ways to handle the the gravity of these cases. So as the years went by at the prosecutor's office, were there areas that you found yourself specializing in, or areas of growth? Tell us a little bit about that time there, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So when I started at the DA's office, I started as a misdemeanor prosecutor. I handled cases as small as JP Class C tickets, which, them in themselves are very important cases as well. I remember as a JP prosecutor, being able to dismiss a case against a defendant for theft charges, and she was stealing specifically to feed her family. And I remember when I dismissed that case, I listened to her story. And even though she was a defendant, I still listened to her and I dismissed it. And I remember she cried and stayed in that room and cried and just was so thankful. So even those JP small class C tickets, you're always making an impact there, right? And so I started my career there. And then I started doing DWIs. I specialized in domestic violence. So I was in a specialty court for domestic violence for about a year, where I just handled domestic violence cases. And then I progressed to handling really egregious felonies. And then I specialized in handling cases involving sexual assault of a child 10 and under. And I did that for some time before I left.
Oh my goodness. I mean, Gabrielle, that is an undertaking like none other, because, not to sensationalize it at all, but for those listening or watching, thinking about what it's like to build a case around that kind of information means that you have to get in there and really understand the facts, see visual pictures or images and things like that depicting the accounts and the abuses, and how do you find balance between taking in that information all day and then also being able to find joy and peace and still see hope in the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard, but I think being educated on it really helps. And so before I went into this special division, I was educated on secondary trauma. And essentially, they gave me some tips on how to handle that. And I really appreciated the Montgomery County DA's office for doing that, for educating me prior to putting me in the position. And so I handled it as simple as, if I had to have a meeting with a victim and I knew it was going to be a hard meeting because we were going to get into some of the facts of the case, I would schedule them at certain times of the day, right? And so I would schedule them mostly at the end of the day so that I wouldn't start my day with something so heavy and so burdensome. And it wouldn't affect me moving forward. I would do it to the very end. And then I would go home and decompress with my dog, with my family, with my husband. And I would just find avenues to leave that at work. I'm sorry. And so that's just a little tip. I knew, before I started that division, I didn't realize that when I was having to watch videos that were hard to watch, I found myself eating a lot and drinking a lot. And I learned that that's actually a sign of secondary trauma, because your brain is trying to do something else than to watch what you have to watch. And so I learned some tips on how to handle that too. You watch without having to listen. You only do with one sensory. You do it pretty quickly. And so I was very grateful in that my DA's office at the time really educated us and really took it priority to keep us healthy.
Wow, it does. It sounds profound, because those things can affect us at such a deep level, that cellular level, I believe, where, it impacts the way that we're thinking and feeling. And so decompressing is such an important thing at the end of the day. So would you do things like, take walks or yoga or music, or what are some of the ways that you found decompressing to work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would definitely take walks. We've got little Riley Ray, so we constantly take her on like 2-mile walks, my husband and I do. And so I really enjoyed being outside and decompressing that way. I enjoyed classical music. I enjoyed listening to that to help me decompress as well. And just talking to my family, just picking up the phone, calling my mom or my dad and just saying, hey, I had a really rough day. I don't necessarily want to talk about why it was rough, but I just want to talk. And we would just talk like my family was there. We just say,
Yeah.
how's the day going? And what are you doing this weekend? And things like that. So just having a really good support system really helped.
Think so. And it sounds like kind of those conversations would be grounding, like reminding you of your life and what your, what your things are, your values and so forth. So that would help you kind of disconnect from carrying that burden. But now I love that you were able to get some of that information and training on the front side of that tenure there. Did you see things changing as more awareness came out around like brain science and like you mentioned trauma informed earlier? Maybe you can share with us a loose definition or what that means to you, and then kind of how you saw that changing or expanding knowledge as you had your time there at the DA's office.
Yeah, so we had monthly at the DA's office in Montgomery County. We had monthly trainings, and in those monthly trainings, we trained about anything. It could have been something as rules of evidence. It could have been trauma informed. It could have been a special guest coming. They always made it a point to keep us just updated on new things that were happening at all points, and they actually expected us, being in the specialty courts, to do the same. And so we would have to train others. For example, we would have to train and educate the grand jurors before they sat in their grand jury position for the months that they were going to sit in. And so that's just one example, but we did a lot of community outreach. And so all that to say is we were constantly being trained and educated on being trauma informed and how to handle it. I would say that throughout my career there, things progressed in that the world progressed, right? Like at some point, we were going through a pandemic while I was there,
Yes.
right? And so we had to educate not only so much on being trauma informed, but also just mental health in general, because so many people were suffering so much from this fear of COVID, from being inside all the time, from not being isolated from their family. And so that's just one example of just how we were constantly progressing and staying educated and just kind of doing everything we could to still be there for our survivors.
Well, it sounds like it was really a choice that your office made, your leadership, and then you as a professional and as a valued member of that team to keep yourself healthy and to do the work to make the choices, which is a message that we try to share with survivors. I know, to fast forward a bit, your work with Dee Miller, working with clients every day who are sharing their experiences similar to what you experienced at the DA's office. So have you been able to use some of those same techniques and tools and kind of bring that to this other side of the world that we're in now together, which is amazing, being a champion for those voices that for so long have not been heard? But are you finding some of those things translate into the new work?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that I'd been talking about the DA's office in Montgomery County a bit, but I do really want to talk about our firm, and that I really respect and appreciate that they have someone like you, Kim, that we have a survivor ambassador to help our survivors, to help them with resources, to be there to listen. And not a lot of firms have that. Right. It's very much, and I appreciate, Darren and Rochelle Guyton who really push for all of this to happen. I really appreciate us, the firm, willing to be open to this, knowing just how great, just knowing how many cases we were going to have with survivors and how important it was to have you, Kim. And so I really did appreciate that. And I loved that when I got in the firm. I remember when we first met, I was very excited. But yeah. And things that I've taken from here, for example, we handle cases all throughout the country. And so unfortunately, I cannot create a rapport face-to-face with victims sometimes, but I can do it over Zoom. Technology is great. Yes. And I have learned from some of the tools I took there to here. And, same thing, I'll do a very hard call more in the afternoon than I will in the morning. And we create safe space even over Zoom. And so anytime we talk to a victim, or I'm sorry, a survivor, we don't always have to talk about the bad stuff, right? Sometimes we just get on a Zoom call just to talk to them, to check up on them, so that they can see our face, so that they can hear who we are and what we stand for. And then we create that safe place and letting them know that we're here for them, that they can trust us. And then sometimes, we do have to have the hard Zoom calls where we talk about the facts of their abuse, but we also make sure that Kim is available to help them after those calls. So Kim, you are an amazing asset to this firm.
I appreciate that so much. I feel just as honored to be part of this amazing team, because with the wealth of experience that each of you have, and you mentioned Attorney Rochelle and Attorney Ramesh and Darren and Andy, who just such stellar professionals in wanting to provide not only a path to justice, but also a compassionate process that doesn't re-victimize, that supports and tries to close some of those gaps. So I love knowing about your history and kind of what brought you to this point in life, because I think for those watching and listening that are maybe in the criminal justice system or anticipating maybe being a part of that process, it is so wonderful to hear the dedication that you had to that position, because I think sometimes they feel like, does anyone really hold this as closely to their heart as they are by living it? But it sounds like you, in fact, do. I mean, you were inspired as a young woman.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and you mentioned us having kind of this division in this area to provide support for survivors. And I've seen you and Attorney Rochelle come into the entire team and bring in not only inspired stories of that you've worked with survivors. And, we use the words victims and survivors kind of interchangeably, because a lot of people feel like they still want to be recognized as someone who's been victimized and has gone through that. And I feel that way sometimes for myself even, and so kind of go back and forth. But so do you find that there is a particular cases that you have processed through that also gave you the drive to continue this fight and not get kind of stuck in the difficulty, but know that you had that beacon of hope you wanted to offer to people?
Yeah, I have a bunch of cases that come to mind, but one specifically that comes to mind was when I was fairly young in my career. I was about a year and a half in, so still kind of baby ADA. And I tried a domestic violence case, and I actually lost that case. It came back as a not guilty. And I tried that case without the victim. And so I went in there and I presented the evidence that the law allowed me without a victim to present. And I gave it everything I could. And I did so because I knew how scared she was. I knew that she wasn't willing to fully disclose. I knew that she wasn't in a position where she felt safe to tell her story. And I knew that I had enough. I had enough still to tell a jury about her story. And I went in there, and just me and the detective, we tried that case. And she actually thanked me for that. Even it came back a not guilty. She did thank me. And interestingly enough, unfortunately, the abuse happened again in the future. But at that point, she was ready. And so we actually ended up being able to hold that man accountable. And so, and she specifically reached out asking for me. She wanted me to handle her case. And it's just one of those things that they stick with you, right? Because that's when I really felt that the long hours, the waking up every day, the struggles, it was so worth it, even if it was just me and the detective fighting for her.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm kind of going back to that personal value of showing up and doing the hard thing, even though it's hard. And I imagine making that decision to go forward with that case without presenting, the witness, the victim, was another hard thing, because so often we feel like, oh, our prosecutor's just worried about their win-loss rate and all those things that, what really drives them. And yet here you were willing to be her voice and to go against this situation that had occurred and hold him accountable. And by showing up, you showed her to have endurance and perseverance. And then when she was ready, she came back around. That's a remarkable story.
Yeah,
that's remarkable.
Her story, she definitely stuck with me. And I knew, even though that jury, I knew going into it, there was a big possibility I was going to get that not guilty. I knew jurors were not going to like that she wasn't there. But it wasn't going to stop me from doing what was right. And
Right.
she stuck with me. It was one of those cases that always stuck with me. And I knew I was where I needed to be.
You made such impact, I'm sure, in her life, and believed in her. And often, do you feel like with the survivors and the victims that you've worked with and interviewed, both on the criminal side and the civil side, that you're now involved in, that just by believing in them and showing up, is that a big step in providing good care for them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Kim. I'll tell you, when I have hard meetings with my survivors, when it's that hard meeting where they have to basically put themselves back in that situation by describing what happened to them, um, I always make it a point to tell that survivor that I believe you, because those words are so powerful. Unfortunately, a lot of these survivors have been placed in situations where they have spoken out before and weren't believed,
Yes.
where they had reached out for help and no one helped.
Mhm.
And I just always make it a point every time. I make it a point to say, I believe you. What happened to you was not okay. And I'm here. I'm here. And I always say, let me carry that burden. All I ever want from you is for you to tell your truth when that time comes. And I want you to take care of yourself. And, whether that's mental health, counseling, services, whatever it is that they need, that's all I ever want them to focus on. And I always tell them, let me bear the burden. Let me do all the work.
Oh, that's really powerful, I believe. I love that because it does allow them to, I don't want to say it negatively, but kind of stay in their lane, of finding the strength to move through it and knowing that they can have you help hold, the piece of it that you're seeking justice around. And I wonder, I love that. With that though, so have you found that with the clients you've worked with, that justice looks kind of different for everyone?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Justice can come in all shapes and forms, right? Sometimes justice is sending a person to prison for life. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's that person doesn't get ever prosecuted on the criminal side, but they do on the civil side. And even sometimes it's just that allowing that survivor to tell their story and being heard and being believed. Even as
Yes.
something as simple as that in itself, like once that process starts, when that person feels comfortable to disclose
Mhm.
and to come out and to ask for help, and just saying, I believe you and I'm here to help you and we're going to fight through this together, I think in itself is justice.
Oh, it is. It feels like you're giving the power back that someone lost through a victimization. And I honor that. I honor that so much. And that warrior mindset I see in you, it's just like you are willing to put yourself out there openly and vulnerably, and fight for people, and fight for, righting the wrongs that have occurred. And with the Me Too movement and kind of the justice reform, and things that we were seeing almost in the middle of the pandemic too, kind of all that happening at the same time. What did that look like through your eyes?
At the time when that Me Too movement was happening and the pandemic, I was at the DA's office. And so for me, what that looked like was survivors standing together. That's what it looked like. Because up for so long, survivors have felt alone in what they're going through, right? And they have felt like no one believes them. They feel alone. They feel ashamed. They just feel all sorts of things, right? Negatively. And in that movement, we had people standing together and we had people who were silent speaking out. And so it was definitely an amazing thing to watch, especially unfold with me being at the DA's office at the time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that a lot of times we feel like those behind the badges and the nameplates and the door, titles around DA or anything like that is scary. And it's hard to think that people are human and that they're seeing it in a positive way. But I agree with you. Hearing people find their voice and rally together, gave me a lot of hope. One concern and worry that I had, though, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is that with people opening that up and sharing and disclosing, that there was just a bunch of kind of open wounds and hurt that was out there. It makes me wonder about some of the resiliency practices that you talked about and some of the help with secondary trauma. Do you mind revisiting a little bit of those things for people that might have finally found a voice and have shared, maybe even just told their best friend or their roommate, but then like are feeling the effects? What are some other ways that you think might be helpful for them to move forward?
Yeah, I would say obviously the biggest thing that sticks out to me is self-care, right? Self-care and giving yourself grace.
Mm-hmm.
Once that person finds the strength to find their voice and to disclose and to talk about what's happened to them, they are going to be experiencing a lot of other things that come with it, right? And Kim, I'm sure you understand. And just being able to recognize when I need a break, when I need help, when I need to talk to someone, when I need to just take a walk outside, when I need a furry friend to kind of hold, right? Being able to just self-care and recognizing that, and also giving yourself grace and knowing that things are going to happen still, right? You're still going to feel certain ways. You might even blame yourself at some points, right? And being able to say, no, I need to get out of that. I need to give myself grace and look at what I've overcome, right? And I just think that looks really different for a lot of people. It comes in different forms. And I would also say that having a really good support system, I'll tell you this, whenever I meet with survivors who are younger, I usually mom will be in the room or dad or some family member. And I will take that family member out of the room and I will ask them how they're doing, whether they have had any counseling to help them through this, right? Because a lot of times those people blame themselves. Why did I allow that person near my child, or why did I do this or that? And so I always also focus on them and making sure that they're good, because the survivor is going to need them to be good, right?
Wow. Yes, I've never thought of that perspective. It reminds me of when you're on an airplane and they tell you to put the mask on first,
Yes.
right? If you're with a young child or something, that just analogy came to my mind. But that's terrific. So you really are complex and looking at things at very many levels. And I, again, as a survivor, but speaking for those, that are trying to work through those hard things, I say thank you for that. And so at the firm, you're going to be, you guys have teamed up to work on some really difficult dockets. I know you're working on cases against Boy Scouts of America, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And clergy, those that have been offended or violated through an act of clergy. What are some of the other dockets that are coming to light now and that we're taking on, types of cases?
Yeah, so we've got, we recently went up to California to actually do a press release conference on a big case that we're taking. La Luz del Mundo is a big mega church, started out of Mexico, and there are a lot of those churches here in the States now. And so we're taking a lot of those cases. We are handling a lot of the New York sexual assault dockets as well. The New York is going to get ready to open up a window for essentially to let survivors when their statute of limitations passed already, they're opening that window up again to allow them to pursue civilly, not criminally, but civilly. And so we've been talking to a lot of victims in pertaining to assaults regarding hospitals, doctors, hospital staff, doctors, radio personnel. We've got teachers. We've got just like really facilities in the penetration facilities. I'm sorry, not penetration, the pen where they go to where they go to when they go to prison, right? They were sexually assaulted there. So there's just a big variety of cases that we've got coming in from there. We've got a big variety of cases coming in from Louisiana. And yeah, so we're chugging along, and we're actually looking into doing some human trafficking cases as well.
Mm-hmm. And that is such an area that has evolved to really help us understand the plight of victims who have found themselves, ensnared in that. Well, as I hear the level of those types of cases, my heart goes to you and our team of just wanting to also, hope that we all step into that self-care and that we are, good to ourselves and each other as we are, taking on the cases, but definitely have the strength for it. I mean, you are stepping out there. I know recently you were, if you don't mind sharing, especially appointed on a particular case where your knowledge and expertise just made you exactly the right person to try this case. And I'm just so honored for you.
Oh, thank you, Kim. Yes. So after working with the DA's office in Montgomery County, I actually started working at the DA's office in Comal County. I spent some time there. And right before I left, I touched a case that I did some investigation work on. And the DA there, she's awesome. She reached out to me and said, listen, I would love to hire you as a special prosecutor to come back and try this case. And I'm actually getting ready to try it in 3 weeks, believe it or not. So busy time. Yeah. But I was very honored that she thought of me and was thought that I'd be the perfect person to handle that case. And it is a very complex adult sexual assault case. And I'm just the fact that I can do that though is amazing. And the fact that Darren is actually letting me do that, right? There could have been other bosses in the world who were like, nope, you're working here now. I want you to just focus on what we've got. But Darren was so excited and was so like, yes, if you're still out there helping people, I want you to do it. And so, yeah, I'll be trying that case in 3 weeks.
That is phenomenal. And we are just honored that you were chosen to do that and that you're willing to step out there. I agree. The firm does walk alongside this issue, I believe, in so many ways, and wanting to make impact for healing and to show endurance, perseverance, to build survivors. That's one of the reasons that we love doing this show, is we often get to hear from survivors and learn about their journey, what helped them, what cause additional hurt, where we can grow and learn. But I'm certain that hearing from you today and them getting a glimpse into who you are as a person and why you fight for these cases is definitely making them feel supported and understood and heard. So again, I thank you for that. This is a place where we discuss and talk about difficult things that have happened in dark moments, but you've brought a lot of light to the issue. And as we recognize, again, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, just want to encourage people to get out there, learn about the issue, right? And support that cause.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you on that.
Yes. Well, thank you again for joining us. Thank you for being a part of our team at D. Miller and Associates, PLLC. It is such an amazing place to be able to join together, feel supported, go out there and do the good work. So is there anything in closing that you'd like to share that might inspire a survivor to feel cared for and understood?
Yeah, I would just say that when you're ready to find your voice, even if it shakes, we're listening.
Love that. Love that. So show up as you are, right?
Show up as you are. We're listening.
I love that. Well, you're showing up. I see that every day, and we're honored. And so in closing, I just want to thank everyone for watching today, getting a little bit of an insight on how it works from the prosecutor side, from the attorney side on the civil cases. And we look forward to growing with you and having you at the firm. Thank you again for joining me today.
Yes. Thank you, Kim. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, wonderful. Well, until next time, have a wonderful weekend and please be brave.